The desert was endless. Golden waves of sand stretched as far as the eye could see, rolling under the burning sun like a restless ocean. Aaron walked slowly across the dunes, his scarf pulled tight around his face to block the wind and dust. His boots sank into the hot ground with each step, leaving a lonely trail behind him. He was not lost. He knew this desert well, for he had grown up in a small village at its edge. Since childhood, he had listened to stories about the ruins buried beneath the sands. Stories of a forgotten empire, once powerful and proud, now turned to dust. Some said the ruins were cursed. Others said treasures and secrets lay hidden, waiting for the brave to uncover them. Aaron had always been curious. He was not a warrior nor a hunter, but he had the heart of an explorer. He believed that the ruins held more than gold or jewels. They held history, truth, and maybe even hope for the future. That was why he carried his pack filled with water, rope, and simple tools, walking under the fierce sun while most would have stayed home in the shade. After hours of travel, he reached a ridge where broken stone towers poked out of the sand like the bones of a giant beast. The sight filled him with awe. The ruins were real, not just tales whispered by elders. The air around them felt heavy, as if carrying the memory of countless lives long gone. Aaron's heart beat faster. He climbed down carefully, brushing sand from carvings that still marked the walls, symbols unlike anything humans used. He whispered to himself, "So it's true. Something lived here long before us." The desert wind whistled through the hollow buildings almost like a sigh. Aaron moved deeper into the ruins, his footsteps echoing softly. He entered a collapsed hall where sunlight filtered through cracks above, lighting the dust in golden beams. Fallen columns lay across the ground, broken but still showing strange designs. He touched one, feeling the grooves carved by hands that must have lived thousands of years ago. Hours passed as Aaron searched. He sketched symbols in his notebook, drank carefully from his water flask, and pushed deeper into the forgotten city. Finally, he discovered a narrow opening half hidden behind a fallen arch. It led downward into darkness. A faint glow flickered from below, like fireflies trapped in the shadows. Aaron hesitated. Part of him wanted to turn back, but his curiosity pulled him forward. He lit a lantern and climbed down, his fingers gripping the rough stone. The air grew cooler as he descended, and the glow grew brighter until he stepped into a wide chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The floor was smooth and polished, though cracked with age. The walls shimmered faintly, lined with crystals that glowed softly, filling the room with pale blue light. At the center stood a large structure that looked almost like a coffin, made of shining metal covered in symbols. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. It was not a coffin. It was a pod. For a long moment, he simply stared. Who could have built this? Was it meant for the dead or the living? He set down his lantern and moved closer, running his hand across the surface. The metal was warm, pulsing faintly as if alive. Suddenly, the pod released a sharp hiss of air, and a thin line of light ran along its edges. Aaron stumbled back in shock as the front of the pod slowly opened with a low, deep sound. Inside, he saw someone. It was not a human. A tall figure lay within, wrapped in fabric that shimmered like silver sand. Her skin was pale, faintly glowing in the crystal light. Her hair flowed like dark water, and her face was calm, peaceful, as if she had been sleeping for centuries. As the pod fully opened, her eyes flickered and then opened wide. Aaron froze. The eyes were large, shining with a deep golden color unlike anything he had ever seen in another being. They moved slowly at first, then quickly, scanning the chamber before settling on him. The figure sat up, weak but graceful. Aaron's heart pounded so loudly he thought it would echo in the chamber. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. The figure tilted her head, studying him. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft and melodic, though the words were strange and hard to understand. Aaron raised his hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. I don't understand you," he said gently. "But I'm not here to hurt you." She blinked, her expression unreadable. Then she tried again, her words broken but clearer this time. "You human?" Aaron's eyes widened. She knew the word. "Yes," he said quickly, pointing to himself. "Human, my name is Iran." She repeated the word carefully. "Huh, man." Then she placed her hand on her chest. "Nira." Aaron swallowed, realizing that this was no dream. He was speaking to someone from another world, another time. Nira looked around the chamber, confusion filling her golden eyes. She whispered something in her language, sorrow in her voice. Aaron could not understand the words, but he felt the meaning. loss, disbelief, loneliness. Slowly, Nira tried to stand, but her legs shook. Aaron rushed forward instinctively, catching her before she could fall. She looked at him in surprise but did not push him away. Her hands were cool, her frame light as if the long sleep had weakened her body. Aaron helped her sit down again, offering his water flask. She studied it carefully before taking a small sip. Her eyes widened at the taste, and for the first time a faint smile touched her lips. Aaron smiled back. "Water," he said, pointing at the flask. Nira repeated softly, "Water." In that small moment, something passed between them. Trust, fragile but real. Aaron sat beside her, careful not to frighten her, and tried to explain with gestures and simple words. He pointed upward, making the shape of the sun with his hands, then spread his arms wide to show the desert. She watched him, her head tilting slightly as she began to understand. When he drew the shape of the ruins in the sand and shrugged to show confusion, Nira's face grew sad again. She placed her hand on the ground, pressing against the stone as if she could feel the memories beneath it. Then she whispered something that sounded like a prayer. The chamber was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the glowing crystals. Aaron did not interrupt. He respected her silence, sensing how much she had lost. After a long while, she looked at him again, her golden eyes steady. She touched her chest once more. "Nira," she repeated. Then with effort, she touched his chest lightly. Aaron. It was the first bridge between them. Aaron felt a strange warmth inside him, not just from her touch but from the realization that they were no longer strangers. Two lives from different worlds and times had crossed in this forgotten place. He could not explain why, but he felt it was not an accident. The desert had hidden her for centuries, and he had been the one to find her. As night fell above the ruins, Aaron helped Nira climb out of the chamber. The stars lit the sky like a million sparks of fire, and Nira looked at them with wide eyes, as if seeing them for the first time in ages. She whispered something soft, almost like wonder. Aaron stood beside her, looking at the same sky, feeling the same silence. In that moment, the endless desert did not feel empty anymore. It felt alive. It felt like the beginning of a story neither of them could have imagined. The desert morning came with a pale golden light. The sky stretched wide and cloudless, painted in shades of rose and orange as the sun rose over the dunes. Aaron sat near the ruins with his pack open, preparing a simple meal of dry bread and dates. His eyes kept drifting toward Nira, who sat quietly on a broken stone column a few steps away. She looked different in the daylight. The soft glow of the crystals was gone, but the sun brought out new details in her face and form. Her golden eyes reflected the light like twin flames. Her dark hair shone faintly, and her skin carried a delicate glow that made her seem both fragile and strong at the same time. She held herself with calm dignity, though Aaron could see the weakness in her hands as she tried to grip the rough stone for balance. He tore a piece of bread and held it out to her. "Food," he said simply. Nira looked at the bread carefully as if studying something strange. She touched it, then brought it slowly to her mouth. After chewing softly, her eyes widened in surprise at the taste. Aaron smiled. She ate more slowly at first, then with more confidence. He offered her some dates, and she tasted them too, nodding with approval. "Good," Aaron said, pointing at the date. Nira repeated softly, "Good." Her voice carried a gentle rhythm, almost like a song. For a while they ate in silence. The desert was still, except for the whisper of the wind carrying sand across the ruins. Aaron wondered what Nira was thinking. She had woken from a sleep that must have lasted centuries, into a world completely different from the one she had known. The cities she remembered were gone, her people vanished. Yet she sat with calm eyes as if trying to understand instead of despairing. Aaron decided to try speaking again. He touched his chest. "Aaron." She looked at him and nodded. Then she touched her chest. "Nira." This time her lips curved slightly into the hint of a smile. Aaron felt a small relief. It was progress, even if only a little. After breakfast, Aaron packed his things and gestured toward the desert horizon. "We need to move," he said, pointing at the sun, then at the dunes. He knew they could not stay long in the ruins. Bandits often searched for treasure here, and the heat of the day would soon become unbearable without shelter. Nira tilted her head, studying his gestures. Slowly she stood, though her steps were unsteady. Aaron rushed to her side, holding out his hand to support her. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted his help. Together they began walking across the sand. The desert sun climbed higher, pouring its heat onto them. Aaron pulled his scarf tighter, shading his face. Nira, though clearly weakened, walked with surprising endurance. She did not complain or show fear. Instead, she kept her golden eyes fixed on the horizon, as if searching for something far beyond the dunes. At midday, they stopped beneath a tall stone arch half buried in sand. Aaron poured water into a small cup and handed it to Nira. She took it gratefully, sipping slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady. As they rested, Aaron tried again to build words between them. He picked up a stick and drew a circle in the sand. "Sun," he said clearly, pointing to the sky and then to the circle. Nira studied the drawing, then the sun. After a pause, she repeated, "Sun." Aaron nodded with encouragement. Next, he drew a simple wave-like line. "Sand." He brushed his hand across the ground. "Sand." She copied his motion, her voice soft but clear. "Sand." A small warmth spread in Aaron's chest. This was working. Slowly, carefully, they were learning to share words. Nira then surprised him. She bent down, took the stick, and drew a symbol of her own, a graceful curve with 2 lines branching out. She touched it lightly and spoke a word in her language, melodic but unfamiliar. Aaron pointed at it, trying to copy the sound. Nira's eyes widened slightly, and she gave the smallest nod, as if pleased. For the first time, Aaron saw the faintest spark of hope in her expression. When the heat softened in the late afternoon, they continued their walk. The desert stretched endlessly, but Aaron knew the direction toward his village. Still, the journey would take time, and he worried about Nira's strength. Yet as the hours passed, she showed more resilience than he expected. When she stumbled, she rose again without complaint. When the wind picked up, throwing sand into their faces, she narrowed her eyes and pressed forward. At nightfall, they found shelter near a rocky outcrop. Aaron built a small fire, using dried wood he carried in his pack. The flames flickered warmly in the cool desert night. Nira sat close, her eyes reflecting the light like molten gold. She watched the fire intently, almost with reverence. Aaron noticed her gaze. "Fire," he said, pointing at the flames. Nira repeated softly, "Fire." Then, to his surprise, she extended her hand toward the flames. For a brief moment, the fire grew brighter, as if answering her. Aaron's eyes widened in shock. She pulled her hand back quickly, looking at him with caution, almost as if she feared his reaction. But Aaron only stared with awe, not fear. Fire," he whispered, pointing at her, then at the flames. Nira lowered her eyes, as if ashamed. But Aaron shook his head and smiled gently. "Beautiful," he said. She looked up at him, surprised. For the first time since they met, a clear smile appeared on her lips. It was small, but it carried warmth that touched the cold desert air. They sat together by the fire, sharing silence that felt comfortable, not empty. The stars above glittered endlessly, painting the night sky with silver light. Aaron leaned back, watching them. Nira followed his gaze, her eyes wide. She whispered something in her own language. The sound soft and filled with wonder. Aaron did not understand her words, but he understood the feeling as the night deepened. Nira leaned slightly against the stone behind her, her eyes half closing with exhaustion. Aaron pulled his scarf and blanket from his pack, offering it to her. She hesitated, then accepted it, wrapping herself in the fabric. For the first time, she seemed to relax fully, her breathing slow and calm. Aaron watched her quietly, his mind filled with questions. Who was she truly? Why had she been placed in that pod? What had happened to her people? He had no answers yet, but he knew one thing for certain. She was not his enemy. She was someone who needed him, and strangely, someone he already felt connected to. Before he closed his own eyes, he whispered softly into the desert night, "You're safe now." Nira, though she could not understand all his words, Nira stirred slightly as if she had felt their meaning. A small, peaceful expression rested on her face. The fire crackled softly, the stars shone above, and the desert stretched silent and endless around them. But within that silence, 2 lives, one human, one not, had begun to build something fragile and precious. Not just survival. A bond. The desert sun rose again, casting long shadows across the dunes. Aaron and Nira moved carefully through the golden waves, their footprints trailing behind them. Each step carried them farther from the ruins and closer to Aaron's village. But the desert was not empty. Others wandered its sands, searching for riches in broken places and for victims to rob. By late afternoon, Aaron noticed something unusual. The silence of the desert was broken by faint sounds, metal clinking, whispers carried by the wind. He stopped walking and raised his hand, signaling Nira to pause. Her golden eyes studied him, then scanned the horizon. She sensed it too. They were not alone. Aaron's heart beat faster. He knew these lands. Bandits often prowled here, men desperate for wealth who would kill for water or food. He tightened the strap of his pack and looked at Nira. She stood tall, her expression calm, though her hands trembled faintly. She had strength, but she was still weak from her long sleep. If they were attacked, it would fall on him to protect her. "Stay close," Aaron whispered, though he knew she might not understand every word. Still, the tone of his voice was clear. She nodded once. They walked on, pretending not to notice. But shadow soon rose over the dunes. 3 figures appeared, dressed in worn cloth, faces covered by scarves. Each carried weapons, curved blades that glinted in the sun. The bandits spread out slowly, like wolves surrounding prey. One of them called out in a rough voice, "Travelers!"
"What do you carry?"
Aaron's throat tightened. He kept his voice steady. "Just food and water." "Nothing else," the bandit laughed harshly. "Then hand it over. Or you will give us more than that." Aaron stepped slightly in front of Nira, shielding her with his body. His mind raced. He had no sword, no bow, only a small knife and his wits. He glanced at the sand, the rocks nearby, the slope of the dune. Ideas formed quickly. Humans, he thought, were not always the strongest, but they could be clever. "Run," he whispered to Nira. But she did not move. Instead, her eyes glowed faintly in the fading sunlight, and her hand twitched as if energy stirred within it. Aaron saw it and shook his head firmly. "No, too dangerous," he whispered again. He did not want her to waste what little strength she had. The bandit stepped closer. Aaron suddenly bent down, scooping a handful of sand and threw it hard into the leader's face. The man cursed loudly, stumbling back. At the same time, Aaron grabbed Nira's arm and pulled her toward the rocks. The bandits shouted and gave chase. Aaron ran as fast as he could, dragging Nira with him. The sand slipped beneath their feet, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He led her into a narrow gap between 2 large stones where the shade cooled the air. "Stay here," he whispered urgently, placing her behind the rock. She started to protest, but he pressed a finger to his lips. Her golden eyes softened, and she nodded reluctantly. Aaron turned and faced the approaching shadows. His heart thundered, but his mind was sharp. He picked up a loose stone and waited. When the first bandit rushed into the gap, Aaron swung the stone with all his strength, striking the man's shoulder. The bandit fell with a cry. The second came quickly, raising his blade. Aaron dodged back, narrowly avoiding the strike. He stumbled but grabbed a stick of dried wood from the ground, using it to block the next swing. The impact rattled his arms, but he held firm. Behind him, Nira's eyes blazed. She raised her trembling hand, and a faint spark of light flickered in her palm. The bandit froze in shock as a small flame shot out, striking the sand near his feet. It did not burn him, but it startled him enough for Aaron to act. Aaron lunged forward, using the stick like a spear, and shoved the bandit back. The third bandit, seeing the strange fire, hesitated. He stared at Nira with wide eyes. "What is she?" he shouted. Fear replaced greed in his voice. Aaron did not answer. He grabbed Nira's hand again and pulled her deeper into the rocks. The bandits, now shaken, did not follow immediately. They shouted among themselves, arguing whether to risk chasing the strange pair. Aaron and Nira climbed quickly, scrambling up the rocks until they reached a higher ledge. From there, they could see the desert spread wide and endless. The bandits below cursed, throwing stones in anger, but none dared climb after them. Finally, after what felt like hours, the bandits gave up and vanished back into the dunes. Aaron collapsed onto the stone, breathing heavily. His arms shook from the effort, his throat dry, his heart still racing. Nira knelt beside him, her golden eyes filled with concern. She touched his shoulder gently. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice soft. He looked at her and smiled weakly. "We're safe. For now." She lowered her eyes, ashamed. "Weak," she said haltingly, placing her hand on her chest. "Nira, weak." Aaron shook his head firmly. "No, you saved me. Without your fire, they would have killed us both. Her gaze met his again, and he saw uncertainty there, but also gratitude. For the first time, she realized he did not see her as a burden. He saw her as a partner. They rested on the ledge as the sky darkened. Aaron shared the last of his water with her, insisting she drink more than he did. She tried to refuse, but he pushed the flask into her hand, smiling gently. She drank slowly, then handed it back. The stars appeared one by one, lighting the night with silver fire. Nira sat close to him, wrapping the... Aaron reached out, gently placing his hand over hers. "You are not weak," he said again, his voice steady. "You are stronger than you know, and I will not leave you." Her golden eyes softened, and a small smile touched her lips. The desert night grew colder, but between them, a quiet warmth spread. They were no longer just two strangers caught by fate. They were allies, and though danger walked the sands, together they would endure it. The night after the bandit attack was long. Aaron and Nira stayed awake for hours, their ears sharp for any sound in the shifting dunes. The desert was quiet again, but danger always lingered in its silence. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Aaron's eyes were heavy, but his spirit was steady. He had chosen to protect Nira no matter the cost. When the sun rose, they climbed down from the rocky ledge and walked back toward the heart of the ruins. Aaron thought it wiser to remain near the ancient city for now. The bandits would search the open desert, not the broken walls and buried halls. Besides, Nira kept glancing back toward the ruins, her golden eyes filled with something deeper than fear. Aaron sensed that she carried memories hidden in those stones, and he could not yet take her away from them. The ruins looked different in daylight. Crumbling towers threw long shadows over the sand, and broken statues of unknown figures stood half-buried, their faces weathered by time. Nira touched the walls as they walked, her fingers tracing the symbols carved deep into the stone. Aaron followed her silently, watching her expression shift between sorrow and longing. Finally, she stopped before a collapsed archway. The sand around it was smoother than the rest, almost as if brushed by invisible hands. Nira knelt down, pressed her palm against the ground, and closed her eyes. A faint glow spread from her hand, and the sand began to shift. Slowly, carefully, an opening revealed itself, leading downward into darkness. Aaron's breath caught. Another chamber? Nira looked at him, her face calm but her eyes serious. She spoke a few words in her language, then gestured for him to follow. Aaron lit his lantern and stepped into the passage. The air grew cool and heavy, carrying the scent of dust and stone. The walls here were smoother, untouched by time, their carvings still sharp. The deeper they walked, the brighter the air became, not from his lantern but from the walls themselves. Strange crystals grew from the stone, glowing with a soft golden light. At last they entered a wide hall. In the center burned a flame. It floated above a stone pedestal, bright and alive, yet untouched by wind or time. Aaron froze in wonder. The fire gave no smoke, no heat that burned, but its light filled the room with warmth. "What is this?" Aaron whispered. Nira stepped forward slowly. Her face was solemn, her movements reverent. She lifted her hands, palms open as if greeting an old friend. The flame responded. It flared brighter, dancing higher as though recognizing her presence. Aaron watched with wide eyes. Nira spoke softly in her language, her voice carrying sorrow and pride together. Though he did not know the words, he understood the feeling. This fire was not just light. It was history. After a long silence, Nira turned to him. She struggled with the words, but she tried. "This heart," she said slowly, pointing at the flame. "Heart of people." Aaron's brow furrowed. "Your people?" She nodded. "Yes, fire gave life, power." Her eyes softened with sadness. "But pride, war, end." Aaron felt a weight in his chest. He looked at the flame again, imagining a civilization once strong, using this eternal fire for creation and destruction. Now all that remained were ruins and memories carried by one survivor. Nira walked closer to the pedestal, her hand hovering just above the fire. The flame shifted, curling upward toward her hand as if drawn to her. A soft glow spread across her skin, making her appear even more otherworldly. Aaron stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Does it hurt?" She shook her head slowly. "No, fire! Remember me." She hesitated, then whispered another word, broken but clear. "Home." Aaron's throat tightened. He wanted to reach out to tell her she was not alone, but he remained silent, letting her have this moment. After some time, Nira turned back to him. She pointed at the flame, then at him. Human. Strong. Find me. Save me. She pressed her hand to her chest. Nira, not alone. Her golden eyes met his, shining with something more than gratitude. Aaron felt warmth spread through him, deeper than the fire's glow. He had not expected this. He had come searching for ruins, for history, but instead he had found her. And somehow she had found him too. They sat together near the pedestal, the eternal flame lighting their faces. Aaron took his notebook from his pack and began sketching the hall and the fire, recording what he saw. Nira leaned close, watching with curiosity as his pencil moved. She pointed at the flame, then at his page, repeating the word carefully. Fire, Aaron nodded. Yes, fire. She smiled faintly, then took the pencil from him with careful fingers. She drew slowly, her hand unsteady but graceful. She sketched a symbol, curved lines flowing together like waves around a sun. When she finished, she tapped the page and said softly, Home. Aaron traced the symbol with his eyes, then looked at her. Your home was built on this fire. She nodded once, her smile fading. Home, gone? Aaron's chest ached at her words. He closed the notebook gently and met her gaze. Maybe gone, he said slowly, but not forgotten. You are still here. Your people live through you. Nira stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then softly she whispered his name. Aaron. The sound of his name from her lips made his heart skip a beat. It was the first time she had said it with such certainty, as if the bond between them had grown stronger in this sacred place. The flame burned steadily, casting golden light across the stone walls. Aaron and Nira remained by it for hours, sharing words, gestures, and silence. She taught him simple phrases from her language, pointing to the fire, the walls, and herself. He repeated them clumsily, making her laugh quietly when he stumbled. That laughter, light and soft, echoed in the hall like music. Aaron smiled. He had never heard anything so beautiful. As night came above the desert, the eternal flame continued to burn without weakening. Aaron knew they could not stay here forever. The world outside still carried danger. But in this hidden hall, he felt a rare peace. Before they left, Nira placed her hand on the pedestal again, whispering words in her tongue. The flame flared one last time, then settled back into its calm glow. She turned to Aaron, her eyes steady. Promise, she said slowly. Protect fire. Protect me. Aaron placed his hand over his chest. I promise. For the first time, Nira's expression softened fully. She reached out and touched his hand briefly, her fingers cool but gentle. Aaron felt the weight of her trust, stronger than any vow he had ever made. Together, they climbed back to the surface. The stars shone above, and the desert stretched silent around them. But inside, both felt something had changed. The ruins were no longer just a place of loss. They had become the beginning of something new. The desert stretched endlessly before them, waves of golden sand rolling out beneath the morning sun. Aaron tightened the straps of his pack and glanced at Nira. She moved beside him silently, her long steps graceful and steady. Her golden eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and watchful. Though she had lived through so much loss, she carried herself with quiet strength. They had spent the last night near the ruins, close enough to feel the warmth of the eternal flame even from above the hidden chamber. But Iran knew they could not remain there forever. Bandits still roamed the desert, and storms could sweep in without warning. He had decided they must travel toward the old trade routes. Somewhere along those paths there would be caravans, settlements, or at least shelter. Nira did not question him. She trusted him, though Aaron sometimes wondered if he deserved it. He was just one man, a wanderer with a journal, a lantern, and a stubborn will. But when Nira looked at him, it was as if she believed he carried the strength of many. That thought alone gave him courage. The first hours of travel were quiet. The desert was not empty. Small lizards darted between rocks, and hawks circled high above. But the silence of the sands pressed heavily on them. Aaron tried to break it with small words. He pointed at the rising sun and said, Sun. Nira followed his hand, then nodded slowly. Sun, he smiled faintly. Each time she repeated one of his words, he felt they were building something together, small bridges across the wide gap between their worlds. After some time, Aaron noticed her slowing. The heat of the desert was harsh, and though Nira moved with endurance, she was not used to walking under the burning sky for hours without pause. Aaron stopped, raising his hand gently. Rest. He guided her to a rocky outcrop where thin shadows offered relief. She sank to the ground, breathing calmly but deeply, her face glistening with sweat. Aaron pulled a flask from his pack and handed it to her. She looked at it curiously, then drank in careful sips. When she finished, she returned it with both hands, bowing her head slightly in quiet respect. Aaron sat beside her, leaning back against the stone. He gazed across the dunes. "We'll need to travel by night more," he said softly, half to himself. "The sun takes too much." Nira tilted her head, not understanding all the words, but she caught his meaning. She pointed at the horizon where the moon would rise later, then mimicked walking steps with her fingers. "Night walk," Aaron nodded, smiling. "Exactly." The hours passed slowly. When the sun dipped lower, they set off again. The desert changed colors with the evening light, from gold to amber to deep red. It was beautiful in its silence, but also dangerous. Aaron kept his hand near his knife, scanning for movement. As twilight deepened, the air cooled. The stars began to appear, scattered like diamonds across the sky. Nira lifted her face to them, her expression softening. She raised a hand, tracing a shape in the air. Aaron followed her gaze and saw that she was pointing out constellations. She spoke words in her tongue, melodic and gentle. "You know the stars?" Aaron asked quietly. She looked at him and nodded. She pointed again, then drew a circle in the air. "Home," she whispered. Aaron's heart tightened. Perhaps her people had used the stars to guide them across these deserts long ago. Perhaps those same stars had watched her civilization rise and fall. Now they were watching the two of them, walking side by side through the endless night. By midnight, they found another place to rest, a cluster of stones shaped by wind into natural walls. Aaron built a small fire from dry branches he had gathered earlier. The flames flickered low but steady, giving light and warmth without drawing too much attention. Nira sat across from him, the firelight dancing across her face. She watched the fire as though it reminded her of the eternal flame beneath the ruins. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Aaron broke the silence. "Do you ever want to leave the desert?" Nira lifted her eyes to him. She struggled with the words, then answered slowly. "Desert, pain, but desert, memory. Hard to leave." Aaron nodded thoughtfully. "I understand." He stared into the fire, his voice softer now. "I came here searching for the past, too. I thought the ruins were just stones, stories for my journal. But then I found you." Nira tilted her head slightly, listening. Aaron hesitated, then looked at her directly. "No, I think the desert gave me something greater than history. It gave me you." The fire popped quietly between them. Nira did not answer right away. Her eyes searched his face as if weighing his words. Then slowly she smiled, a rare, gentle smile that softened her sharp features. She whispered his name again, almost like a secret. "Aaron." The sound warmed him more than the fire. They slept lightly that night, taking turns keeping watch. The desert was never truly safe, but together they felt less alone. When dawn came again, they continued their journey. The days blurred into one another. Long hours of walking, short rests under rocky shadows, nights under the stars. Aaron marked their path carefully, using his compass and maps, but also began to rely on Nira's instincts. She seemed to know the desert in ways he could not. When the wind shifted, she could sense storms. When the dunes rolled endlessly, she always found the direction of hidden wells or stone shelters. One evening, after hours of silence, Nira stopped suddenly. She raised her hand, listening. Aaron froze. In the distance, he heard it too, the faint sound of bells, a caravan. His heart leapt. Caravans meant safety, trade, and perhaps news of nearby settlements. He looked at Nira, who nodded once, her expression calm but alert. Together they climbed a tall dune. From the top they saw it, a long line of camels moving across the sands, guided by travelers dressed in flowing robes. Lanterns swung gently from poles glowing like stars in the desert night. Aaron exhaled in relief. "We found them." But as they descended toward the caravan, he noticed Nira's hesitation. Her step slowed, her eyes wary. Aaron touched her arm gently. "It's all right. They're travelers, not bandits." Nira looked at him, then at the caravan. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded slowly. She trusted him, even if her heart carried fear of strangers. When they approached, the caravan guards raised their spears cautiously. Aaron lifted his hands, calling out in greeting. "Travelers, we mean no harm." The leader, a tall man with a lined face, stepped forward. His eyes moved from Oren to Nira, studying them carefully. "You are far from the trade roads," he said. "What brings you here?" Aaron told him simply, "Searching the ruins. We were attacked by bandits. We're heading for safe ground." The man's gaze lingered on Nira as if sensing she was different. Aaron stood firm, his tone respectful but steady. "She is with me. She is under my protection." After a long pause, the man nodded. "Then walk with us. The desert is cruel to those who walk it alone." Relief washed over Aaron. He turned to Nira, who watched the caravan with quiet eyes. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "We're safe now." As they joined the caravan, the night felt less heavy. The sound of bells, voices, and camel steps filled the silence that once pressed on them. Nira walked close to Aaron, her hand brushing his arm lightly, not in fear but in trust. For the first time since they had left the ruins, Aaron felt they were not wandering aimlessly. They were moving toward something new. And though the desert still stretched wide and endless, he no longer felt lost. He had Nira beside him,